Today we have a wonderful person with us, Miss Khris Adcock. You've recently gotten married.
That's right.
And so congratulations.
Thank you.
And so let's talk about this Designated Caregiver Clause.
So the Designated Caregiver Clause is actually one of the best kept secrets to me in the entire Act. Because in the Cannabis Act in Mississippi, there's not a provision for people to do like home delivery from a dispensary or curbside service. So there is a provision that allows for a designated caregiver. So a patient has an opportunity to designate a caregiver who can basically act in his or her stead. So that means if someone can't, because of their condition a lot of the time, get to a dispensary, a caregiver could actually take on that role for that patient.
Gosh, and that would be so helpful because we know, even for young children, and then of course we have to think about our elderly. Right. And even for me, there was a time when my son was so sick that he couldn't have gone to a dispensary. Of course, he's older now and he is doing well, but it would have been, I could have seen myself being a caregiver for him. And so this is a wonderful provision that the legislators have put into this bill so that patients of any with any debilitating medical condition could potentially have a caregiver. That's right. And so a caregiver, a general caregiver, can have up to 5 patients.
That's right. They can have up to 5 patients that they work with at one time. Sometimes that number may change, but you can't ever exceed 5 at one time.
Do caregivers have to also have a background check? And how much does that cost potentially?
Yeah, they do have to have a background check actually, and that can be done through our office. They actually work with our fingerprint unit to get that background check done, and it's $37 to get that background check done.
Yeah. So that's very, very reasonable. But they also do have to apply for a card as well.
They do.
And so it's another $25?
That's correct. Yeah. They get designated by the patient, and then they apply online through our office, and then there's a $25 fee for that, and that's an annual fee.
Yes. And just to give a little bit better clarity, but the patient who has already been certified by the practitioner and approved, gone through the process of getting their medical registry ID card through the Department of Health, they have to specify that caregiver who also has to go through this process.
That's right. That's right, Angie. We won't certify a caregiver first. We have to have that designation from the patient because it's really the patient saying, I want this person to act on my behalf. And so they have that designation. They take that ownership in their care and designate a caregiver, and then the caregiver applies and they go through the process.
Okay. So what are some reasons that a caregiver may be denied the ability to be a caregiver?
Yeah. So they have to go through that background check, and what we're looking to see is that they don't have any disqualifying felonies. And then if they did, then that would keep them from becoming a caregiver. There are other things, like we want to make sure, number one, that the patient's designated them. Of course, if they provide any false information through the application process, that would be a reason to deny a card. And a caregiver does have to be 21. Unless they are a caregiver, let's say for their child, and then they can be under the age of 21 if they're the legal guardian or parent for a child.
Okay, that's great to know. So what should a caregiver or patient do if they happen to move from the original address?
Yeah, so we're in the process, it's a new program that started, and we're building out our systems, of course, but they will update us within 20 days that they have a change of address, and we'll update that information for them.
Awesome. It's just really important to be able to track where everybody is, and so that they can also get updated information.
That's right.
So that's great. And so now, can a child under the age of 18 be denied access to medical cannabis because they do not have a caregiver?
That's one of the requirements in Mississippi that we've seen that is a little bit different. Children do have to have a designated caregiver, and that does have to be a parent. Of course, we know that in all situations, a parent may not be available. So if a child is not in the custody of his or her parent, then they can have a legal guardian at serve as the caregiver.
Yeah, and so the process would just work out very similarly
That's
with
right.
a legal guardian or a parent, and that way, we can make sure that the children who definitely need medical cannabis are taken care of and can get the help for their debilitating medical condition that they need.
That's right. They would just have to show evidence of that court ordered. We have a number of children who are in the custody of the state sometimes that have very debilitating conditions that this treatment might benefit them.
Yeah. And you see so many children with, severe epilepsy. And so, we just want to make sure that all of the children, can get the help they need.
That's right.
if their pharmaceutical drugs are not working for them.
That's right.
And so, as we know, even with the medical cards, the patients are concerned about their identity, but what about caregiver identity? Is that also kept confidential, and how could it be?
Angie,
used?
there's not a specific provision to keep that caregiver information confidential. However, there's not a specific requirement to release that information either. So we're trying to keep it as confidential as we possibly can. For example, you'll see on our website where we list the different licensed cultivators and processors. We don't list patients, of course, and we don't list caregivers either.
Yeah, and so, they wouldn't have to be worried about their information being released to the world.
That's right.
So, all right, and what about, I think a lot of them will be concerned about, are they protected under the bill in Mississippi to where they could still be able to purchase or sell or own firearms? Are they protected the same as the patients are?
So the law in Mississippi does give some protection there. However, from looking at it, we've got conflicts between state law and federal law a lot of the time. So, a caregiver, though, is not actually using medical cannabis. So when they complete that federal registration for a firearm, they need to read that question very carefully because it's actually asking about their use. And as a caregiver, they would not be using, they would be serving as a vehicle per se to provide access for a patient.
Yeah, that's so true. And so, well, another question is, can a registered patient be a caregiver to another patient?
That's something that we've had a lot of discussion about actually, and I can understand the reasons for maybe wanting to do that. However, I would really advise people to think about that because they would be taking on a dual role. In one aspect, they would be a patient. In one aspect, they would be a caregiver. And the way that we track purchase histories in the system, I wouldn't want anybody to put themselves in a position of jeopardizing their ability to get a card potentially. So I wouldn't want them to accidentally be above a possession limit because they really couldn't figure out, was this their medical cannabis as a patient or is this their medical cannabis as a caregiver? So I would really discourage people from taking that route.
I agree. So what happens potentially if a caregiver is pulled over with a patient's medical cannabis? And so will the law enforcement be able to potentially check into your registry portal to see if they are legitimate and all? Could you tell us about that?
Sure. So when we issue an identification card for a caregiver, it also contains that patient number. So when a person, let's say they do get pulled over, they have the medical cannabis in their possession, that can be verified through our system that they are a caregiver and this is what they should be possessing for that patient.
Yeah. And so it's just really important for them to have that card with them at all times and to keep that patient's medical cannabis sealed in the original containers. And that way there's just no question in the law enforcement's mind that, this is a legitimate caregiver for medical cannabis and they have this person's medicine and they're taking it to them.
That's
and so, I think it's just so important for them to keep their card with them and that medicine in the original containers.
That's right.
This is a big question, and I know that I think it kind of answers itself, but can a caregiver be prosecuted for consuming a medical cannabis person's cannabis?
Yes, because the caregiver takes on the responsibility of access basically for the patient. That doesn't mean that they have the ability to take that person's medication, just like we wouldn't take prescription medication like antibiotics or anything like that for someone else's medication. They shouldn't take this medication either. Yeah. So actually when they register with us and they get designated as a caregiver, that's one of the attestations that they sign, is that they will not use their patient's medication.
Yeah. Another question that I often get, because other states allow caregivers to grow medical cannabis for the patients.
Right.
But that's not the way I understand our caregiver clause. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Sure. So the act that we have in Mississippi really doesn't allow for what some states call home grow, whether it's a caregiver growing at home or a patient growing at home. That's not allowable in Mississippi right now. Who's to say it may not be in the future? Right. But currently it is not. So everything does have to be purchased through a dispensary. It has to be grown by a licensed cultivator, processed by a licensed processor, and tested. So it's really all about product safety.
Yes.
But they cannot grow at home and can't use from a home supply of any type.
Yeah. Well, Kris, I just thank you so much for going down this journey with me on being a caregiver in Mississippi, because potentially I think that we will have a lot of caregivers, because we have a lot of wonderful, compassionate people in Mississippi who want to be able to help their child or, their family member who's unable to go to the dispensary. Right. It is so important that patients have somebody to help take care of them and to make sure that their medications are right and that they're able to get the access that they need safely. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in and watching MCPATV. For more information, go to our website, follow us on social media, and share this informative video with your friends and family. Thanks again for watching MCPA TV.